All right. Hello, everyone. It's Jason Fierno here representing the Mining Mavericks. The Mining Mavericks are a curated group of industry leaders who are passionate about making the industry better and more sustainable for everyone. Today, I've got a very special guest in Debra Mashek. How's that? Is that ick enough? Deb is currently the founder of MyCo Consulting. Impressively, she's got a background from Stony Brook University, a PhD in psychology, right?
That's correct.
Damn, girl. And I'm really excited to have you here, Deb. So welcome. How's it going?
It's going great. I'm really excited to get to chat about collaboration today. And I'm a total fangirl of Mining Mavericks and of you. And so to get to be in the space together is a real gift. So thank you.
I love that you're a fangirl. I'm a fan boy. Is that what I say? Is that the right?
Yeah, you can totally be a fanboy. Yeah.
And I'm a huge fan of yours. So I think we're obviously in the right place to be having a conversation together. For context, maybe you and I have crossed paths as a result of being in the consultancy space, but then probably more relevant to this audience is your passion around collaboration and as you will explain to us, partnerships as well, which is a common thread amongst the two of us and something that you and I have discussed a few times. So I'm really looking forward to getting in and getting granular on effective collaboration and what that looks like. So first, though, I want to give you a shout out because I think this is really cool. It says you were named one of the top 35 women in higher education. That's impressive. Where does that drive and ambition come from, Deb?
Can I tell you, it was such an honor to receive that award too. It's given out by a publication in higher ed called Diverse Issues or Diverse. Well, it's called Diverse. And they really focus on diversity in higher education. So to be recognized by them is just such an honor. I think this question of what drives me, I think is a good one. And a little backstory is perhaps useful here. So, you know, my formative years were spent in a double wide trailer in Western Nebraska. So, you know, a meager beginning, as it were. There was never any assumption I would go off to college, much less graduate school. So those were like very bizarre moves for this kiddo to make. And
good for you.
Yeah, it's awesome because when I entered those spaces, I noticed right away that it was an unfamiliar territory, as it is for so many students who go in. And I used it as an opportunity to just be incredibly curious about the culture of higher ed and of these colleges and the different backgrounds. I was encountering people unlike anybody I had ever met in my hometown, and just the role that curiosity played and really wanting to lean in and learn about them. And at first I thought, I came to realize pretty early on that I was seeing the world from a different perspective. And at first I thought, oh my gosh, that must be because I'm an idiot and I don't get anything and I should keep my mouth shut and pay attention and keep learning. Wow. But then it wasn't too deep into the college experience that I realized, oh my gosh, this is maybe actually a gift, that I'm seeing the world differently from others. And then it dawned on me, holy smokes, everybody else is too. And it was kind of at that point where I think the sense of purpose bubbled up for me around, you know, something I wanted to do in the world was to create these spaces, to curate these experiences where all these people with these different perspectives could actually come together to learn from each other, and to really value those gifts as unique contributions to the world. And, you know, how cool is it that we all see the world differently? What was the quote you told me recently about the limited edition?
Oh yeah, one of one limited edition.
Yeah. And so imagine in these spaces of learning and of creating and doing, to have all these limited editions hanging out together, seeing what happens. So I think that's where the passion comes from.
I appreciate the vulnerability associated with that and your upbringing and stuff. So thank you for sharing that with us. When you say, if I can, I'll ask you a few questions around that, just because I'm also super curious. But you said there was a period where you felt like that you kind of transitioned more toward your purpose. Was that was during your schooling as you were pursuing your PhD, and
I
maybe
think
you
it
could more
was,
context there.
yeah. So I think kind of the first little inklings of it. I remember very specifically, I was in a psychology of women or psych of women course. And a student had shared some story about her brother that when he was little, he used to do this thing that she thought was abnormal, but she's like, hey, he turned out normal. And I thought in that moment to highlight, what does normal really mean? And my instructor, I remember her Professor Bullock, she was so excited and pulled me aside afterward to say that was really important that you asked it there, because had someone not asked that, then everyone might have gone away with the assumption of, normality or whatever. So it was kind of the first time I had really been patted on the head for sharing my unique perspective, and it worked out so well. So I started practicing more of that. And then that idea of purpose, I think, kicked up probably, that was more in grad school, I think, where I found that I really wanted to be a teacher. There were a lot of other people in grad school who wanted to be researchers. And so I was kind of the oddball out there. But then I started again, like you said, sharing that vulnerability about, hey, I want to do something different. And once you know it, there were actually a lot of other people hiding in the shadows who wanted to do that too. So we were able to kind of start forming a group and sharing what we had learned, and just new opportunities bubbled up because of the relationships and because of the vulnerability. So I think that's where I would point to that really as the passion awareness point.
Okay, that makes sense. I mean, that makes sense. There's a couple of things my brain has latched onto. The 1 of 1 limited edition, I think is really a significant point. And I think with that, we all offer our own unique perspectives. Even if you travel in life with somebody on the same road at the same time, their vantage point is different than yours, and you have something that you could teach them or learn from them. And I think that's amazing personally. So that really resonates with me. The other thing that sticks out in my mind is the notion of vulnerability and being willing to, put yourself out there, because it can be, and it is, frankly, uncomfortable for sure if it's something you're not used to doing, and it takes practice. But that really resonates with me as well. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. And I think something that blends those two together that I think the world needs more of is intellectual humility. So being able to say, hey, I don't know, can be incredibly risky in a lot of situations, especially where we're often celebrated for having our idea and, being the know-it-all in the room or something like that. So being able to say, I don't know, but then also in that same moment, recognizing that the person sitting next to you quite literally has a different vantage point on whatever this problem is that's sitting on the table. And that by either moving around the room and taking a 360 look at that thing, or twisting and turning the object and getting to see all of the nuance, that's really how we learn and how we discover, and I think how we come up with better solutions to the world's complex problems. And so, I think that vulnerability piece in relationship with curiosity and relationship with relationships is, I think that's where it's at. I think that's the secret sauce of how we're going to save the world. High five to that.
It makes me, this is a bizarre thought, or odd to me that I'm having this thought, but when I was in college, I thought I was going to be an engineer. So I took a bunch of math and science courses and stuff, which wasn't my highest and best use. But I took a class in mathematics on vector spaces, and it talked a lot about being three-dimensional and the different dimensions. And what you just did with your hands, like looking at the different sides of the Rubik's Cube, I think is really interesting, because we're not two-dimensional. We are multifaceted and multidimensional. And that just, it came to my mind. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, or if it's just a fleeting thought from my standpoint, but it's really where my mind went.
Yeah, I mean, what echoes for me in that is we talk a lot about in the workplace being able to bring our whole selves
Mm.
and enjoying and really welcoming in that multidimensionality of the person that we are. We're not just our role at work, and we're not just our roles outside of work, but there is that sense of purpose and mission, but also how we do and how we be, and all of that coexist. Whether I'm moving my hands again now, I'm moving them from the workplace over to the non-workplace, and of
You're
course,
just trying to confuse me.
yeah, no, I feel like we need a whiteboard to sketch this all out. But
yeah, right.
yeah, and then the way that all those boundaries are very permeable, also, especially in this COVID world where we're moving back and forth between home and work. We were just talking earlier about how you can look over to a different side of the room and see this other aspect of life, but the multidimensionality and the vector spaces of where we are, I think it resonates.
Yeah, it was an interesting course. I think I actually did okay in it. It was physics that killed me, but that's okay. Everything for a reason, right? So
yeah,
I
took my one and only physics class the second semester of my senior year, and I think had I taken it earlier, I might have been a physics major. I loved it. But
oh my gosh, you and I are like oil and water then, because I took physics twice. I failed it. So I have an F on my transcript and a D. And man, I worked harder at that class than any other class I ever took in college, and I was only able to get a D. So that tells you how my mind thinks about that stuff, or did then. I don't know now, but.
And I'm thinking we should celebrate the hard work and the improvement and the success that you got it done.
That's right. Well, it was a pivotal moment for me in my life, because I pivoted to be a business guy, which is
to not that.
Yeah, to not that. Well, I'm impressed by the top 35 women. That's great. So I'm proud of you.
Oh, thank you.
When we talk about collaboration, what does it mean to you? And as we were saying hello, because we haven't seen each other in a while, you mentioned the concept of partnering. Maybe you could walk us through where you are in terms of collaboration, the benefits of it, what makes it so hard, how that intercedes with partnerships. Maybe you can give us, I'm not asking you for a dissertation, but you can educate us nonetheless.
Yeah. So fascinating. This word collaboration is tossed about in our daily life all the time. I mean, my 11-year-old will say, I just watched a really cool YouTube video about a new collab between, and then he'll introduce like two people I've never heard of. And so, we use collaboration basically as a stand-in word for any form of working together. And I think that's a disservice to the word collaboration, but also to the notion of working together. So, in a very basic way, we can work together just by exchanging information. So I have something you want, I can send it to you. Maybe there'll even be a tit for tat where I'll send you the information, you'll send me money or something like that. But really, that's just networking, and it's important. And there are absolutely times when that sort of doing together is effective, but it's like the very, surface level stuff. And that then you can move beyond that to actually start altering activities. So, maybe not only am I going to send you information, I'm going to alter when I send you that information so it'll be maximally useful to you. So like on your cadence for your business or something like that. And that's important. And we're coordinating now, but it's also, that's not as deep as we could go. And then we can start saying, well, what if we cooperate? And according to the model that I'm having in my head, it's the Himmelman's collaboration continuum. If anyone wants to check it out, and I can share, can we do show notes? Can I share that later?
Totally.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll share it in the show notes. But this idea of, cooperating is really, now we're also sharing resources. So it might be staff time, it might be space, it might be technologies or proprietary frameworks or something like that. And this is good. And we're moving in a great direction. But collaboration to me is when the heart really gets involved and when it starts to be an opportunity to really learn from each other, that there's not, one person compelling a particular action from the other, but like we are in this together. We are sharing risks and rewards. We're sharing turf and time and treasure and all of those great things. And that to me is what makes it also a partnership. And so I've started, when I talk about what MICO is all about, I've started to use the word partnerships more because I think it's actually more immediately resonant with the kind of work that I'm cultivating, given collaboration is used as like this, blanket term for all forms of working together. So it means something specific to me. Why I think it's so dang hard is there are a couple reasons. I think culturally, we reward people for their solo activities. I mean, we really celebrate the renegade, the cowboy, the Marlboro man culturally is like this figure that we revere. And I think starting in preschool, we celebrate the kids who are able to sit quiet and not interact with the other kids. And, elementary school, we celebrate the kiddo who, does his math sheet really quick. And I think we're less likely to celebrate the times when they're playing really well together, or, the things that are more collaborative. And then in the workplace, at least in my world of academia, if you have the sole authored paper and it gets like, it hits the press and everybody loves it and people actually cite this paper a gazillion times in your career, that's a really great reward. You're not necessarily rewarded for being the 20th author on a chapter or something like that. That was very collaborative. So, I think we're acculturated to do more solo activities than collaborative work. But then the other thing is we're not actually trained how to do collaborative work, and it's really freaking hard. So, we can have all these great intentions and these incredible visions, and there's all this energy in the room at first. And so many people, as soon as you say, is it just me, or does collaboration suck, or does group work suck? And they're like, yeah, it totally sucks. It's because we don't have in place the habits of heart or mind to actually engage in collaborations well. And so they fizzle, they fall apart, they become frustrating, they become like these mindless zombies where we keep getting in the room and meeting, and it feels like you're having the same freaking meeting over and over and over again, because people don't necessarily know how to get the action, how to get the accountability. And it's hard. So I think it's hard because we're not incentivized to do it. We're not trained how to do it. And then once we get into the workplaces don't necessarily have the structures in place in order to allow us to collaborate well either. Sorry, that was more of a dissertation than I meant.
No, I teed you up to that, so that's good.
I'm rambling.
No. I'm just no. That's the exact level that I was hoping to get.
Okay.
Now we can pick it apart a little bit.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. For context, relative to the Mavericks, the real, or one of the underlying conversations or underlying uses of collaboration is around collaborative contracts, collaborative arrangements between a mining company and a contractor. So just for people's basic understanding, part of the focus is on that, and what opportunities do we have to work together better than some of the more traditional models. So I just wanted to put that out there for context, so that maybe it makes a little bit more sense why we're taking a deep dive into this. But I'll say this, and then I'm going to ask a few questions. I personally and professionally believe that while it's hard, as you said, and it takes heart, which I want to explore a bit more, there's a ton of upside and there's a ton of value if it's done properly and if it's done with the right intentions and the right incentives. And I think that is the case for application within the mining capital development space. So that's where we're at. You said heart. Well, actually, hang on. I'm not going to go there yet. I find it really interesting, and it really resonates with me that you talked about being a kid and being rewarded for doing your work fast, or doing it by yourself, or being an author, the solo author, as opposed to the 20th of a chapter. From a psychology standpoint, is there a composition of human nature that we're programmed to reward the individual, or is there something maybe that you can help my novice mind understand whether or not we're programmed for that out of the womb?
Yeah, I would say two competing ideas pop up for me in
Okay.
response to that question. One is, we all do have ego, and, there's self there, and there is that sense of self as something distinct from others. So that pops up, but then there's also, evolutionarily, we're programmed actually to tend and befriend. That you can't, think about our ancestors out on the, facing down the tigers, in the caves or whatnot, to be social, to be really tuned in to the extent to which you're included in the group. There's a reason, for instance, that when we've done wrong, we feel that sense of shame and shrinking and guilt, and we go and we try to repair the relationship because we can't afford, with our old, the old software that's running here, we can't afford to be ostracized and kicked out of the cave, as it were. And so those social relationships are actually really also very dominant. And the idea of acting in the kind of that soul actor way, it's not cross-culturally relevant. I mean, there are plenty of cultures where the sanctity of the group or of the family is more important than that self-focused. It's a very, Western ideal of what it means to be successful, for instance.
Yeah, no, it makes me think about the cultural differences. It makes me think about, I have affinity for Mexican culture, and it's very family oriented. You have meals together, your abuela's there, your grandma, the whole family. And I think it's amazing, but it's different than your typical, we're recording in the US, typical culture within the US. So that's an interesting perspective, not perspective, that's an interesting point.
So, and the other, another piece of that is we do have places within North American culture where we do really value the we. So I'm a close relationships researcher by training. So I used to teach a class on hooking up, breaking up, and everything in between, for instance. Okay. But one of the things that happens when we enter, say, a romantic relationship even, is we come to start speaking in terms of we pronouns, where, we start to talk about we are doing this, or we believe this, or we value this. That doesn't happen in week one of dating, but after you're together for a while, it does happen. And I don't know about, in your family, but in my family, I'll say things to my kiddo like, hey, buddy, in our family, we, when you're faced with challenge, this is how we handle that, as to communicate the value. So it's not totally absent, which gives me hope that we can fan that fire a little bit and bring more of that value culturally.
Yeah. And okay, totally. I wasn't trying to be critical necessarily. I think it's just an evolution of our culture, but I know damn well that there are people within North America, since I inadvertently ostracized them, but that want to collaborate and that see the value in we, getting to we, and how do we solve this problem? How do we approach it? How do we tackle it? So I think that's an important distinction and an interesting concept as well. So if you put yourself in the shoes of, starting to put together a relationship where there's somebody, an owner, a mining company has a need, but they don't have the skill set to build something, because that's what the context is here. So with a contractor, like, what are the things that you would say are like, you absolutely have to get them right, maybe is one. And then the flip side of that is, don't ever do this, or if you do this, this is what's going to happen. Like, what are some lessons learned or recommendations versus things to avoid?
Yeah. So with the caveat that the mining industry is not something I know deeply, and so you'll have to help me out with the language when I screw it up. So,
no, you won't screw it up. You know enough about the mining industry to be dangerous. So
there we go.
No worries.
So one of the things to do is focus first on trust. And trust, trust isn't, some of us are more trusting out of the gate than others. That's an individual difference, no problem there. But trust is not something that you can necessarily enter a relationship assuming you've got, oodles and oodles of it. So one of the things to do is to think about ways of starting small to not test the relationship. That sounds very tactical, but to give an opportunity for the other person to demonstrate their trustworthiness. I like that better. And so maybe don't start with a gazillion-dollar project, but what would it look like to collaborate on a conference presentation together, or perhaps write a position paper or a thought piece for a blog or something like that, and develop it over time and eventually escalate it into the gazillion-dollar opportunity. One of the things that I think is really tricky in these spaces where we're talking about a lot of money, projects that take an incredible amount of time, is that one of my pieces of advice in other workplaces is don't start with the contract, because when we make everything contractual, it actually can undermine the quality of the trust that's happening, because so many of these contracts are actually set up to cover the risk, or to offload as much risk as possible onto somebody else, and that's just not a very trusting first step. And so here's another psychology of close relationships fun factoid. Imagine you and I start dating, and the first thing out of the gate that I'm doing is like, oh, well, you paid for dinner last time, I have to pay for this time. I'm so uncomfortable with the idea that I owe you dinner. Like it's a surefire way to set up this very transactional relationship where it's all about tit for tat. And we call that an exchange relationship. And that's in contrast to a communal relationship where once we're really deep into our partnerships, or into our families, or even into our workplace friendships, that we know, like, I'm going to do a nice thing and the world will pay me back eventually. I don't have like a tally in my phone of who hasn't, like I went and got coffee for you and you didn't get it for me. And I'm not tallying that. And the people who are in that very exchange mentality tend to have more psychologically distant relationships. And I wonder if the same is true in, when we're talking about these really deep collaborations, like what are the ways of getting to nurture and really manifest that communal spirit that also works within the operational pieces of the work y'all are doing. So I think I just kicked up more questions than answers there.
No, it's just such good information. I'm processing a couple of things that I would maybe explore further based on that. You were a guest at a roundtable session where we talked about collaboration, and I remember the moment when we were talking about that you're starting with a contract. It's like, wait, you've got this legalese document that you're working through that allocates this risk, yet the desire is to foster a relationship, a collaborative relationship. So that to me was very significant. You just mentioned it there. So I think it's worth repeating. The other theme that came out of that is trust. And that is the number one theme we talk about on the Mavericks, is like, well, it all comes back to that more often than not. So often it comes back to that. And I really like the advice that you gave, which is to start small and to do things, whatever that might look like. But I can think of some examples within the mining industry that might be relevant, like sharing an article with someone that might enjoy it, or giving a book reference, or even just having a conversation with somebody about how their day is going. Simple things like that. Is that applicable?
Yeah. And just to do a little callback to the top of the conversation, it's also an opportunity for vulnerability, of saying, when somebody says, how was your day? Give the real answer. If you're struggling with something, or if you're actually having a great day, like share that. And I think there might be slightly higher ones of, could we do something together, like a professional development training of some sort for our staff, and do it together. So, it's a couple $1,000s as opposed to gazillions. And,
Sure.
and it's about a 2-hour workshop as opposed to a 20-year project. What was in the roundtable?
Yep.
Someone shared an incredible stat about how contract length in the industry has just ballooned over the past, I think they said 30 years. Do you remember what the estimates were for initial page length and kind of where you all are now?
I don't, but I have context to that. When I started in the industry 20 years ago, the first contract that I put in place was probably 6 pages, 7 pages of terms and conditions. Now I've seen them 50, 60, just
Wow.
the legalese risk allocation components. Yeah, so a 10x
Wow.
probably of now there's some nuances to that. The 6 pages was for a lot less money. The 60 was for a lot more money. So there is that. But yeah, it definitely has grown in length.
Yeah, I'm smiling because I'm wondering what prenups look like for marriages. Like if it's the billionaires, like if their prenups are also that much longer, maybe they are. So maybe
Maybe
it's
they
all about
are.
the money.
Yeah, man, I hope not. That would be sad.
I agree.
Yeah, that would be sad. I think I'm just thinking about the example that you gave around coffee, and I want to explore that a little bit more because I've never heard that. This is a new concept for me, so I'm curious. So I'm going to restate it, and then you can tell
Yeah.
me if I got it right. So
Yeah.
what I heard or what I understood is that for people who are like, I'm going to buy you a coffee, and you expect that, then they expect that next time you go get coffee, you bring them one. I think what I heard is that people that think with that mentality are less likely to collaborate, or is it less prone to partnerships? I'm not sure the right way to state it, but conceptually, am I close?
Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity to clarify what I was attempting to say there. So when you're monitoring inputs and outputs in this relational
Hmm.
exchange way, that's an indicator that you're perhaps less communally oriented. But also, if you're in a relationship where you're like racing to go pay back the good action of another, you're communicating very clearly to the other person that actually you're not close.
Hmm.
And so, Ben Franklin was famous for saying, if you want to, ingratiate yourself to someone, go ask them to do you a favor. Because one of the ways that we can create closeness is by having other people demonstrate that they actually care about us. So if I, come and borrow a book from you and you give it to me, you're going to observe your own behavior. Like, why did I just give that amazing, first edition to Deb? It's like, wow, I must really trust her. And I believe that she's going to return it. And I know she's going to take care of it. And so it's doing these communal things as a way of showing, or as a way of actually deepening the trust and the closeness within a relationship.
Okay. Got it. Yeah,
Yeah.
got it. Makes sense. I think there is an aspect of reciprocity, though, that is important, not on a one-to-one exchange level, but on a macro level. I definitely have seen and experienced in my own life that it will come back in some way. The positive energy and the good that you put out does come back often in spades. So for me, that's a bit of a distinction in
I
terms
love
of the way
that.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And this idea that it's, thinking about maybe a broader, more open time course for how some of this unfolds. Because the other reality here is that there are some real jerks out there who will just take, 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 take. And
Totally.
if they are never giving back or reciprocating, that's a huge red flag. Those are relationships to, let those dissolve, or, people who are always asking for favors, but somehow never seem available to be helpful when you're in need. Just like in a, if my kiddo had a friend who was doing that, I would absolutely coach, like, maybe that's not a friendship worth investing in. Same
Totally.
thing for our business relationships. The reciprocity is really important, just
I
not in
think,
a tit for tat sort of way.
yeah. Is there, maybe to try to put more context to a contractual relationship, is there, for the folks that are take and not give, are there any early identifiers or things that, any behaviors that people that think like that exude that you could recognize? And then two, is it what if you have to work with them? Is there a way to make it better?
Yeah, I'm going to answer the second question first.
Okay.
So I put together, and I can, again, in the show notes, we'll drop this in. I put together a list of 10 questions that help cultivate the collaborative mindset.
Nice.
And these are questions that we can ask, frankly, in our families and our friendships. But I wrote it with an eye toward creating partnerships in the workplace. And some of them are things like, imagine this goes brilliantly well. What do we see as the best possible outcome? But also, like, what if it tanks and it goes horribly? What's at stake there? What are the values that we share in common? Can we get those on the table? What do we stand to learn from these other partners? Can we imagine any benefit, imagine in a time of crisis, if we are in a relationship with this other partner? Is there some kind of hidden benefit to us? What about the hidden cost? And also, what are we really, in our heart of hearts, what are we most fearful of? What are we most worried about? And having those conversations, in our own head, but then sharing the answers, with that other partner, is a way, I think, of it bubbling up more of that openness to the possibilities of working together. In terms of the behaviors that people exude, that's a harder one. I go a lot on intuition personally. So
Sure.
if I see someone just, it's all about them and they never ask any questions about you, even if it's while you're walking down the hall en route to that conference where you're going to be negotiating the contract details, or these are just totally intuition. So maybe we could like explore these more. But I also feel like the person, this is so minor, but I notice it. The person who's always like, okay, well, you send me the calendar invite for that. It's like, dude, you're the one who asked for the meeting. How about you send the calendar invite? But just that evenness, and I feel so silly that I'm bringing up these little tiny ones, but even like when I'm collaborating with people in another time zone, I bend over backward to do the time zone math to make sure to present things from their frame of reference, so they don't have to do that. And there are other people who are like, well, so when would that be in Eastern? I was like, oh, okay, like, can we share the load here? Like, no one wants to do that extra work. But those are just these little tiny signals. I'd be curious to hear what do you think about all of that? It's not like I don't want to be testing everybody, but those are the things that I start to notice.
No, I think I circle back to what you said before, which is to start small. And I think if you're showing up where it's like, oh, okay, well, you're on the Eastern time zone, let's not start at this time because you're going to want to spend time with your kid. From a like, I can think about that from an industry standpoint, because geographically we're all over the place. But if it's significant enough for you that you notice it, and then somebody else would too. I do. I absolutely do. And I think other people's do too. But I'm thinking that could be an opportunity to start small, to start building trust with people, to be conscious of that, I guess, and make an effort. I don't know.
Yeah, and to be the person in the room who says, hey, Deb, I know you've got kiddos at home. I would hate to go into your dinner hour. So I've got some flexibility here in the morning. Would you like to meet there instead? Would that work for you? Just to signal, I know you're a whole person. You've got other things going on, and I'm willing to offer these adjustments where I can. Yeah, that feels important to me too.
No, it does. I can relate to an industry story, in the sense of an ongoing negotiation now that's coming close to an end as we record this. But the relationship started out without a lot of known variables amongst the players, and it was tumultuous to start. But over the course of months, one of the folks was in the Southern Hemisphere, 16-hour difference. Actually, they're both in the Southern Hemisphere. One of them was in Australia, one of them was in South America. And what I observed from all parties is that they went out of their way to try to be flexible and accommodate and think of people and what they had going on. Fast forward now a few months later, and the aspect of trust is a lot more significant than it was before. So I think there's a lesson learned there, that those little things actually go a really long way.
I love that example. And it also brings up for me the the good old prisoner's dilemma. You remember these stories where if you, you and I, we just got arrested and they take us into our separate interrogation rooms. And if you tell on me, but I don't tell on you. So let's imagine we actually, took down some crime. If you tell on me, but I don't tell on you, I'm the one who's going to get in trouble. If neither of us, spill the beans, we're going to get out of there. And if we both tell on each other, then we're probably going to get some sort of shared punishment. And they've used these models in all sorts of economic exchange research studies. And the way to optimize your outcomes, and in these situations, they'll do it like, we each have like $10 and figure out how to allocate it after all of these different trials. And the way to win a lot of money in this game is everybody should cooperate on the very first trial. And then, let me say it differently. Ideally, everybody always cooperates. You can make a lot of money, quote unquote, in these models. But if you're not sure if somebody else is trustworthy, what you can do is cooperate during the first trial. If they cooperate, whatever they did the last trial, you keep doing. And it's a way of getting that reciprocity going. But if they cheat and don't give you any of their money on the first trial, then you don't give them money the second trial. So I feel like I'm bastardizing this whole model. But the idea is you can, by observing what other people are doing and acting in kind, you're able to figure out if it's a trustworthy relationship.
So it's that reciprocity aspect of that exchange from a trust standpoint, maybe. I think it's an interesting, I'm sure there's interesting studies on that, and you didn't bastardize it or whatever you said, criticize yourself. It's complex and complicated. So what we can do for those who are interested in getting more in that realm, we can add it to the show notes. So
we'll add it to the show notes. We'll have just a great list of resources in the show notes.
Absolutely. We're trying to produce as much value here as we possibly can.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's cool. Well, with that, I think in my mind, because those are actionable tips that I can think of that people could actually put in place easily without major calories being burned, but still make a significant impact. So I think that in and of itself is really quite powerful. So thank you for that. This is a bit out of left field, but I'm curious, what advice do you have for the future generation of leaders? And I think this could apply to all people that are aspiring to be in a position of leadership. I'm not expecting you to say something and try to tie it to the mining industry, because I think it's possible that it's universal.
Yeah. So I think within the context, this is totally true of the mining industry for sure, and in the world in general, is that we're faced with a lot of incredibly complex problems that are not going to be solved with, single framework solutions. So there's one reality. The second reality is that we're swimming in such an incredible volume of information, whether it's data or perspectives or, Google hits, whatever it is. No one of us, just by virtue of our humanity, we are human, we can't know it all or do it all by ourselves, especially within this complexity. So that's the framework I'm coming from. And within that, I think I'll offer 3 C's because I love alliteration. So number 1 is to be curious, which we've talked about a bit today, and that role of intellectual humility and being curious both about what other people know and feel and believe, but also being curious about what you don't know and also why you believe what you believe, kind of what are the origins of those belief systems. But I think that's such a beautiful starting point for relationship. And I think the relationship is critical given the complexity. And I think the second C would be having an ethic of care. So really thinking through how is it that we value other people and contribute to their well-being. So that nurturing sense of giving it away, of really wanting to bring value to other people. To me, that's an incredible leadership quality, that it's not about you or elevating, how awesome you are, but it's really about enabling other people's best work in the way that is most resonant with their values. Let's see. So we have curiosity, care, and I think you know what, I'm going to give you 4 instead. What about connection? Because then the relationship really fits in there.
Sure.
That taking the time to know and to be known, and that's part of the vulnerability thing too. And then the 4th one would be collaborative. So not surprising, given
Totally.
I'm a collaboration maven, hanging out with the Mining Mavericks.
That's right.
But just that learning how to actually do and be together amid all of that complexity, and investing in your own professional development, because unfortunately, we're not yet at a place where this is something that we're teaching, in K through 12 or any place else really. But that there are strategies that you can employ, and it's worth figuring out how to do that. And we can, at the end, I'll give a plug for some resources that I can offer to support that too. So those are my 4 C's advice to leaders. It would fit on a coaster.
On a note card.
Yeah, we can put it on a note card or a coaster.
I like it. Quad C. I don't know what's squared. I don't know. But I like it nonetheless.
Yeah. What's after a cube? Quad. Yeah, quad.
Yeah.
Where, okay. We'll come up with a nifty name, write an article about it.
Yeah, there you go.
We can
collaborate on it.
Totally.
By being curious, having a connection, and caring.
And collaborative.
That's right.
There we go.
Exactly right. No, that's great. What do you see, maybe as a last question, because I value your time, but I think this is really valuable insight. So what do you think, like, what if you could have it your way, what would collaboration look like, or how would we evolve? And then where do you think it's going? Like, what are the trends that you're seeing in terms of people's willingness to put in the heart and hard work associated with it?
I love that phrase, the heart and hard work, because it totally is. I would love to see a reframe of how do we tackle shared problems, from one of how do we distribute risk or minimize our own risk, to one of how do we leverage the possibilities of having all of these brilliant people in the room together with these incredible resources, and with the shared, there's ultimately a shared goal here of creating something together, and how do we really put that first as opposed to our own risk profile. I'm not exactly sure how to do that. It's a twisty problem that we can work on. What were the other parts of the question? That's where my mind went right away, is like, we got to get out of this. Risk is the only thing to be noticing here. Yeah,
I guess it was like, so that's a desire to look in that direction. The second part of that is like, what are the trends? What do you see? Like, where do you think collaborative efforts are going to go?
Oh, yeah. I think, I think I'm going to do another wish really quick, and then we'll do where's it actually, do I think going, is celebrating more constructive criticism or conflict, that really starting to see conflict as a good thing, that it's a way of advocating for that shared interest, and that we can do it well. We don't have to be jerks about it, but how to have good conflict. And here I'll give a shout out to Leanne Davies' book, The Good Fight. I love it. And it's such a useful, it's a leadership book and really good. Also, the importance of honest conversations, that it's okay to have perspectives and to advocate for yourself and your interests, but doing it in a way that's that honors that the other person has interest also, and really thinking through how do we bring these together in new and novel ways. I think there's evidence out there that people are moving in this direction. So whether it's the trend of having, much more open or much more transparent books, for instance, about what really are our CEOs making, what are other staff people making, what really are the impacts of, our behaviors on other stakeholders, whether it's, the environment itself or the communities in which our work is embedded, but valuing those ethical moves, I would say. And I see trends or I see evidence that those trends are happening. And I think we should celebrate those and celebrate the shared successes more.
Totally. Yeah, it makes my heart smile that there's evidence of those trends, because I think that's very significant and important. So appreciate you sharing that insight with us. Okay, I've got one last question.
Yeah.
Actually, no, I'm lying, because I'm going to ask you another one. But this question is all good.
Sorry, I just my phone was evidently sitting right on the edge of the chair and it dropped, but it is fine. I am fine.
Good. I'm glad you're good.
Yeah.
What is there anything that we didn't discuss, we didn't cover today, that you wanted to impart on our listeners, on me, on us, that you had hoped to talk about that we didn't get to?
Well, I feel we covered a lot of ground, so that's exciting. If I were to encapsulate, the things that I most want people to take away from this conversation, is that it is absolutely possible to be collaborative, that if that's a value of yours, there are ways of living it. If there are within the workplace, and if there are challenges you're facing, that there are ways of developing those muscles. We unfortunately don't use them, I think, as often as we could or should. And so to take your own professional development seriously there. And those of you who are in leadership positions, who are running teams and whatnot, being mindful about when you see it in your teams or in your staff, naming it and celebrating it, and taking a look at, we didn't really talk about this one, but taking a look at how you're incentivizing behavior and what you're covering, whether it's in your merit raises or in your quarterly performance reviews, and asking questions about how have you enabled the success of others, or share with me the details of a collaborative project you've been working on, and how that's been unfolding, and how have you put the interest of the other parties on par with your own. What does that look like? So I think that would be my encapsulation of the conversation and the wishes.
Sure. No, I'm glad you brought up the incentive component, because I think tying that to a contractual relationship, I think there's opportunity to put contract incentives in to drive the behavior of collaboration and celebrate that. So I love the notion of naming it and celebrating it. And I think that's powerful. Yeah. Well, Deb, I really appreciate you educating us and taking the time to have a conversation here today. So for anyone who wants to learn more or get in contact with you, what's the best way to track you down?
Yeah, so the best way is to come by the website. So it's www.myco.consulting. And when you get there, there'll be, one of those very annoying pop-ups that will invite you to share your email address. And I would love to be able to share with you resources, deliver high value stuff directly to your inbox about once a week, whether it's articles, perspectives. And there's, on this theme of professional development, there's a paper there. It's 20 pages called People, Tools, and Processes. And it focuses on how you can use people, tools, and processes to enable more collaborative behavior. So swing by there, download that, and that'll be a great first step. And I would love to be in touch, hear about your work, all that good stuff.
Excellent. Awesome. Thank you for that. And I highly recommend checking that out. I know there's a lot of value on your page. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah. And every time I write an article or create a tool or anything, I throw it up there, and it's freely available on the resources page. So, go poke around, find some printables to hang above your desk, whatever's useful to you.
Awesome.
It's there. Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, Deb.
My pleasure. It was good to see you.
Always.